Good morning, everyone. It's Joker, and today we are back with another slime video. And today we're going to be doing the monthly How to Build X Team video. This month is the Schemer meta with Protector Soe, Best Girl Soka, and then the free-to-play Laplace, and technically the 4-star Gabaru, but he's not good, so ignore his existence. This team is a slightly gimmicky green burst meta. There are a number of things to play into, so you could really build this team in two very different ways. You could build it like a typical burst team and just try and have Soka do as much damage as possible on a nuke, and then have the EX damage buff and the attack stacks from Soe. Or you could play into the whole gimmick that Soe and Soka have, where you want to do multiple hits every turn to max out Soe's attack stacks and the Gilgamesh Fate Gate of Babylon move that Soka has. So you could either go one of two ways, because I'm assuming that not everyone is going to have the ability to get multi-hits right now for Soka to really max her out, and so they're probably going to work and end up building her in a more traditional sense. So I'll try and tailor this video to hit both sides depending on if you have those options or not. So yeah, that's the team. This is what we have so far. We are going to get two more characters in these two slots. One of them probably a Rimuru, because Soka's ability board wants a Rimuru, but not always a foregone conclusion. There is definitely room for error there. But we do have two more units that will fill out the team in the future. Okay, so this being a burst green team, green charms are going to work pretty well. So you could do the alt gauge increase on green, so you could really rush Soka's or whoever's alt quickly. You're going to have a rainbow orb that's going to help that. You're going to have the Soka skill that gives 50% extra green gauge to also help with that. So alts aren't truly like a super huge priority for this team, especially if you're going to play into the gimmick more than the traditional DPS that Soka could be. So this charm, while being effective, maybe not as necessary. The Green Soul's secret skill charm. The one that is probably going to be pretty necessary is going to be the Green Gauge Protection charm, because you want to be able to use Soe every turn. That way you can get the full hands of greens, get the rainbows, get the full 6 orbs plus whatever gimmicks you want to use. So this is probably going to be what I use the most, is the Green Soul's Protection charm, just to make sure I can cycle Soe very quickly and efficiently. As far as damage is concerned, this is a synergy-focused team, and we do not have any synergy power charms for some reason. Synergy's been in the game for a year and a half now, and they haven't made a charm for it. So your next best bet, if you wanted to go damage, would be a space attack charm for Soka, since this is a space-focused DPS team. So space attack, that could work. You could do alt damage. We don't have the AoE character yet, but you could do an AoE charm if you wanted to. But that's about it. Yeah, the AoE charm, for if we get an AoE space DPS character, you could use this. But currently, as the team is built, we don't have an AoE unit, so single target. So right now, the space attack charm, the Green Soul's Protection gauge, and the Green Soul's secret skill gauge are going to be the charms that you should probably focus on the most. Alright, speaking about Orb Changers, you really don't need it. Only turn 1, and if you're running a Schemer-focused team, the free-to-play Laplace will do the convert for you. He's got the 2 Schemer orbs convert into greens, and after that, like, you're going to have your conversions coming from Soe. So you really only need either Laplace, or if you just don't want to use Laplace, you could use some other form of green orb changing, whether it be Traya or Wind Lumi, because it's a physical-focused team, like right here. You could use maybe Dark Milim from the first anniversary, because she would also give an alt buff and be an orb changer. Like, that's certainly an option, but they're giving us a unit to do it. So these characters not truly needed unless you want some healing, unless you want some extra damage support. I would just really run with Laplace, and then after turn 2 and beyond, you're just going to be using Soe, because he's got the convert built into him. He's making all these green orbs plus the rainbow. So bringing any other additional orb changers is just highly unnecessary. In terms of alt swapping, so if you have Ahsoka alt but you're not ready to nuke and you want to continue to send orbs, you can have a character change that alt orb into any random color. Because Soe can convert all orbs, it doesn't really matter who you bring that has the ability to do that. So you could, in theory, bring... where is she? Visions of Coleus Blanc. She would turn 3 alt orbs into blues, which generally would be bad because you're not running a blue team. But Soe would just then convert those blues to greens anyways. And she's weakness strike, synergy resistance down. It works very well with what the team is trying to do if you're going for raw damage. Alongside that, you could use Idol Shuna. She would be doubling up on the synergy buff that Soka has, but she would have a double alt convert to greens, and then they would be greens anyways. You could use, if you have access to her at least, you could use Shizu from the Overlord collab. She's not going to be available except if you've been playing the game for a long time, because she came out a year ago. Right? Yeah, a year ago. Over a year ago at this point. But she's also an option. But I don't know if you're going to need alt swappers. You could also use Exalted Champion Rimuru. He probably works very well for this team because of the attack buff. But if you're trying to go for raw damage, bringing like Rimuru or Blanc would make sense. But if you're playing into the whole gimmick of Soka and trying to send as many orbs as possible, then I mean, you're not really worried about damage. You would still probably want an alt swapper, that way you could continue to send just normal green orbs that are going to be buffed up from the follow-up orbs or a multi-hit skill. So it's really up to you and how you want to play it. I would suggest bringing one regardless, and if you have access to Blanc, she's probably one of your best options alongside Exalted Champion Rimuru. But Rimuru's issue is that he can only convert once, so you really got to be choosy. So in that case, I would just bring Blanc, if you're going to go that route. She's going to be your best bet, and she's been around for quite a while. Okay, here's where the team builds will start to vary drastically, depending on how you want to play the team. If you're going for raw damage support, you are kind of limited, because the beatdown battle that I'm specifically building this team for, it nerfs crit, pierce, and Aegis. So you can't use 3 of the 4 primary big-time buffs, which means that you're left with some other things that you could do. So first off, Warrior's Mind Blanc. She's going to be invaluable for pretty much any team for the next year. And they have no real way to nerf her. She would give you an extra 40 skill points, which is fun. The orange buff that she has would affect the 1 rainbow orb that Soe makes if you're not already buffing it by Soka. So that can also work, and then you've got the damage buff. Like that, she is going to be a fantastic support option for damage. Another character would be Divine General Raphael. Stacking alt damage, stacking synergy power, and the space attack 120%. This is a synergy-focused team. It needs an alt buff, because Soe's doing EX alt, but not normal, and then Soka is space, and the presumably AoE DPS will also be space. So Raphael, gonna be a very, very good support character for this side. And then we move into like weakness strike and normal alt buffs, like you could do the physical buff. So a character who could give a physical buff to Soka would be either Tempest Elite Benimaru or the now free-to-play, essentially, Fount of Wisdom Rimuru. He would orb change or for blues, but doesn't matter. He would give Soka the physical buff, which would be pretty impactful. Benimaru is a bit cheaper, so he could work a little bit more efficiently, and you'd have the ult resistance down, which does work because this is a single target beatdown fight. You're only gonna nuke 1 person, so he works very, very well. And then as far as weakness strike, like we talked about bringing Visions of Coleus Blanc for the alt swap, the weakness strike and the synergy resistance down plays very well into this team because no one's giving weakness strike, And synergy down works because you can actually use synergy power here. Apart from that, again, like a normal alt buff, we also talked about First Annie Millum. She would be your turn 1 Orb Changer, or just a converter in general, and give a 70% alt buff. Or technically, like, you could bring Leon, and you would get the 111% alt and EX alt. Soe is already giving alt damage, but it's 100%, so Leon would give 11% more on the EX alt, which I don't know if that's really what you should be looking out for, but he definitely works. Aegis doesn't work, so don't bring Velzar, don't bring Jean. Pierce doesn't work, so don't bring Gobwa. The element resistance down is cool, but I wouldn't bring her just for that one skill. Fern, she would be buffing your synergy power like Sokka, so that's kind of redundant. She'd be buffing EX alt damage, which would be redundant, but she would have the alt resistance down, so that could work. So Fern could do that. You could do it with the Awakened Isis, 120% alt resistance down. Elmesia technically would do 100% alt down, but she wouldn't buff Sokka with the normal alt. So you're actually kind of limited to physical buff, an elemental buff, synergy buff that stacks alongside Sokka, or weakness strike. Because again, you can't use crit, pierce, or Aegis. So it pretty much does restrict you down to a very small number of support characters. And there are a lot of synergy characters, but we're already getting synergy from Sokka. So we don't need to double up on that, unless you're doing something else that Sokka is not. Now, on the other hand, if you were not worried about raw damage, and you're going to play into the multi-hit gimmick that Sokka and Soe wants, one, you have Laplace for the follow-up orb, so that's another 6 hits in a turn. There are only a couple of characters that have the multi-hit gimmick, and they're pretty not available. And that's going to be Commander Hinata or Protector of Peace Hinata. Specifically, Protector of Peace Hinata gives it to green orbs, which this is a green orb team, so that works very well. She also buffs physical attack for all allies, which Sokka is physical. The crit resistance down doesn't matter because we're not using crit, but you can still get the physical attack, and the multi-hit will be very, very impactful to getting those hit stacks in for the sword gimmick. And then Commander Hinata, she's converting to blues, which isn't great, but because Soe converts them, you could have a few turns where you get full hands of blues or something, or the Rainbow Orb would have a multi-hit, and that's it. So if you're maybe going to use a different protector other than Soe, and you're going to focus on a blue protector, you could bring Hinata and you would get the multi-hit gimmick as well. But they're the only 2 characters that have that. So if you're going to play into that gimmick, you're going to want Laplace. You're going to ideally want Protector of Peace Hinata. And then someone else over here, probably an alt-swapping character, again, like Blanc. So you can always have 6 orbs that are being buffed. So you would run like Hinata, Blanc, Laplace, and some other character, whether it be Violet, like the new Warriors Mind Violet. Everyone on here, well, almost everyone will be Schemer. The control stacks and the debuffs and everything, they don't matter that much because we're not a debuff-centric team. But the Rainbow Orbs definitely can help. And the stacking Weakness Strike also would help Sokka. So that's definitely an option for you. But if you're going to play into raw damage, bring damage supports. If you're going to play into the gimmick, bring the multi-hit, bring the follow-up orbs. DPS is very easy. Welcome to Sokka. She's your single target damage dealing character. She's got the damage alt. She's got the sword gimmick. You don't need to bring another DPS character unless you are seriously lacking in damage output, and both the alt from Sokka and the sword skill can't actually get the job done. And then you're looking kind of at a weird pickle, because physical space characters are not very common, especially single targets. Like, if you look at this list, you've got Primal Demon Blanc. Is she on... I don't know if she's on Schemer or not. Does this say? She is on Schemer, so you could do that. You wouldn't be getting the Pierce at all from her, but she would stack a little bit of alt damage for the first couple of turns, so if you need another single target, like, that can work for you. But then, moving down the list, Visions of Coleus Violet, she's space, she's magic, though. doesn't really matter, but her magic buff wouldn't hit Sokka, and that's kind of important. So, Shinsha buffs oranges. You're already getting EX alt damage from Soe, so that's not necessary, and she only gives it to magic characters. So your options for single target space physical is fairly shallow. So I'm hoping that you can just get the kill with Sokka, and maybe you have to bring the Space Blanc, but I really would advise against it, and I would just play into making Sokka do as much damage as physically possible. Okay, in terms of different protection characters you can use if you by chance did not pull Soe, there are a few. You could use Exalted Champion Velzard. You wouldn't get the attack stacks, but you would get an element buff, which is great, and you would get the Drago effect, which would enhance the synergy damage that Sokka is doing, because it'd be 130% instead of 100, which is fantastic. And you'd be getting the element buff, so you could bring an alt buff or an EX. You could bring Fern, and then she would be very, very useful, because you'd be getting benefits from the EX alt and the alt resistance down, because you're no longer having it given from Soe. You could also use, if you have him, Octagram Demon Lord Guy, another green converting character. He's got Lord's Ambition, which means that you could literally bring anybody, I think. Well, no, that's not true. He nerfs I think he gives himself resistance, too. Let me check that. No, I mean, ODL Guy could be good, because you would delete the nerf for Pierce Crit Aegis, and you would also delete the crit damage Aegis power and Pierce nerf as well. So ODL Guy means that you could bring just any support character across the board, and you could make a team work. So you could bring a Pierce team, you could bring a crit team, you could bring Velzard for the Aegis if you wanted to. He would be able to allow you to use those. It's just that you wouldn't get the attack stacks, you would still get the orb changing, that's cool. It just wouldn't truly play into Sokka's gimmick. You'd be going more for raw damage output at that point. But he is a good protector that you can use to lead the team. And then if you want to go the different route, you could use a blue stacking protector. At least up to EX2, you can use blue orbs. I'm not quite sure about Catalyst, but Catalyst is going to need like a very specific team build. Does Clayman nerf oranges and blues in here? Nerfs oranges, nerfs blues. Alright, so yeah, only EX2 then can you bring kind of this blue-focused team. But if you're going to run Spirit Master, Masked Hero, or say Ogre's, not Ogre's Pride Betty Mario, Commander Renard or something, like you would definitely want to bring Commander Hinata. That way you would A, have a blue orb changer, and B, have the multi-hit, so you can play into Sokka's gimmick. So you could, for EX2, bring a green or a blue-focused team and somehow make it work. But apart from that, like other protectors, again, like Renard could work. Primal Demon Violet, not really. Visions of Coleus, Lumi, not really. Warrior's Mind Velzard, Sokka's not on Warrior's Mind. Diablo, the free-to-play one that, well, actually, the one you got for free last month, I don't think those missions are available anymore. But if you have Diablo, like, he would be your very, very most basic blue stacking protector. He could work. I don't know if it would, but it's possible. So you do have a number of options that you can use in replacement of Soe. And to round out the video, we've got some example teams. Definitely not all the options, but just some to get the ideas flowing. Ignore Gabaru right here, go away. But this is roughly the team that I'm running right now. Soe, Sokka, Laplace, both versions of Blanc, so you can get the 6 orbs. We've got the multi-hit from Hinata. So this should work fairly well, while also giving us enough damage support to also have Sokka hit reasonably hard, but also definitely playing into the gimmick. So this is like the best of both worlds. But you definitely don't have to do that. You could do this instead, where you're not bringing multi-hits, you're going more for raw damage, so the weakness strike stacks with Violet, the Rainbow Convert, you've got the damage buff from Blanc, and you've got all three of the damage buffs from Space, Raphael, Divine General, who would all help Sokka do a lot of damage. So you could go, again, either way. And with both of these teams, you could very easily swap Zoe out for like the Exalted Champion Velzard or ODL Guy that I was talking about earlier in the video. You have this version of a team, which is, again, focused more on damage. You've got Benimaru for physical buff, Divine General Blanc for a convert for space characters, which we have 2 space characters here. And she would also serve as like a backup DPS. While being magic, it's still going to work. And she would have that massive 150% ult buff. And then we've got the Hinata from 2nd Anniversary giving us an element buff. So again, trying to make Sokka and this Blanc now hit as hard as possible. Maybe you need a second DPS character. This team is if you're going to go into the blue multi-hit option to, 1, stack Sokka, and 2, get some extra buffs for her sword skill. So the new masked hero, Spirit Master, works very, very well for any team because she's stacking both physical attack and magic attack. So Sokka being physical will get at least those stacks. Commander Hinata, Orb Changer, the multi-hit, plus the ult damage, but we've got Leon from Spirit Master to give us more orb changing and both EX and normal ult damage. Fount of Wisdom Rimuru being free to play would give a physical buff to Sokka, and then we've got Blanc for the blue ult changer, weakness strike, synergy down. This is a traditional blue stacking team to help Sokka do big time damage. Not in 5 turns, mind you, but 8 turns maybe. This is a more kind of lower end. It's probably not going to clear EX2, maybe some of the earlier stages, but you've got Velzard as the sub-protector, you've got Sokka and Laplace again, Milim and Lumi both being orb changers, maybe unnecessary, but I assume you're going to be in this fight for a little bit longer than normal, so the healing from Lumi could be impactful, and then the ult buff from Milim will help Sokka hit a little bit harder. And Space Rimuru will also give an attack buff to Sokka, which would also make her hit a tiny bit harder. But these are, very, very old units with a Protector that's over a year old now, and just Sokka by herself. And then we've got another different version of a blue stack, this time playing into a different Blanc who's going to get buffed. So both space, single target physical, weakness strike and ult swap and synergy down. Commander Renard is going to be stacking weakness strike and ult resistance down on the enemy Clayman. So it works fairly well. And he's giving extra stats to physical, which Sokka is physical. So you have a few different ways. Someone might question why Guy is here. Orb Changer, and as long as Sokka and Blanc are not up front, you can use his ult buff and still benefit from it without giving the actual crit rate to Sokka and Blanc, which would then nerf their damage. So they would have to be in the back when you use Guy's skill. But then you can bring them forward, and they would still have the ult buff. That's why he's here, because he's going to work. If you have Leon, then just bring Leon instead. But just another blue stacking conversion team. So here are a number of different options. Maybe they do, maybe they don't work for you. If you have any other team suggestions that you have found that works, please let me know in the comments. If you have suggestions on how I operate these videos, again, put that in the comments. But this should give you a fairly solid idea of what you should be looking for when you are building the Schemer team. But that's it from me. Take it easy, and I'll see you all later.